Hello everybody, this episode is going to be on the Proxy Workflow in Premiere Pro that was introduced this summer in their 2015.3 updates, I believe. They've come a little ways with it and now it's kind of fully functional. I want to go over some of the little quirks and some of the workflow with this if you're going to be working on it, especially if you're working with like mixed video and different clips with different types of audio tracks. So some things just kind of be aware of when you're doing the Proxy Workflow. First of all, I'm going to start up a new project here, and you can set up your Proxy Workflow within your new project here. As we hit new project, I'm going to name my project. I've got this folder here I'm going to be putting it in and call this my Proxy project, just so I know what I'm working with here. And also now you can set up your Proxy Workflow if you know what you're going to be doing from the very beginning and you know you want the Proxy Workflow. You're going to go under Ingest Settings here and you're going to check mark Ingest. Now there's some things to be careful with here. The presets that they have built into the Ingest Settings here, I'm going to pull down the copy here and say Create Proxies. We're just going to do a Create Proxy Workflow. Now some of the presets that they have, this is not their preset. This is a preset I've added. They've got these presets down here. What you've got to be aware of is that most of these settings here are basically two standard aspect ratios, and they each one of these is only a stereo audio channel. This is a single audio channel that is stereo that has left and right playback on it, but it only shows as basically one audio channel. Now you got to be careful with that, because if you're shooting on a red camera or some of the types of cameras that have, red camera has two mono channels that it shoots, or it has zero audio, depending on how the camera is set up. And you've got to look at those files first and see what type of files they are. If it's two mono files and you encode the proxy footage as a stereo channel, once you do that and you start editing in Proxy, if you move from one machine to the next, it's not going to reconnect. It has an issue with that. It says it'll give you an error message saying these audio channels don't match, and it will not give you an option to reconnect those proxy files, which is kind of a pain. Then you have to re-encode them. So we're going to show you how to do that. And in fact, before we do this, I'm not going to tell it to ingest quite yet. I'm going to uncheck this and I'm going to hit OK and start a new project. And let's look at some media files here. So first of all, one of the reasons you might be using Proxy is if you're using 4K footage and beyond, your computer might not be able to keep up with it. If you're editing on a laptop or even like a home PC that has a really nice video card, sometimes some of the media that you're using, especially if it's red, really high quality, very uncompressed footage, it's going to be really difficult to edit it. And some of the new cameras, if you have like the A7S Mark II and you're shooting 4K, your machine might have trouble keeping up with that. So two things we're going to pay attention here is going to be aspect ratio and the nature of the audio channels of the files that we're going to be importing. So I'm going to import some of these just to start off here. I'm going to import one of these files just to see what type of files we're dealing with. I'm going to go to my project here under my day one folder, and this is a good project to demonstrate this on because we're mixing footage. We're mixing 4K footage with 1920 by 1080 footage here. I'm going to go into my red footage here, and I'm just going to import one file just to kind of see what we're dealing with. Okay, I'm going to right click on one of these files and say import. Go back to my project, and this is something good to figure out before you actually start here. And this one here, this is good to know, this one does not have any audio channels to it. It just shows a video file. Let me go to my other type of video files here. Go to our Sony footage, right click on one of these and import. Go back to the project and look at this. This has an icon with a video clip and an audio clip that belongs to it. So this one has a video clip and an audio clip that belongs with it. Let's take a look at these files really quick. I want to look at the aspect ratio here. This one is 1920 by 1080. I'm going to divide 1920 by 1080, and of course we get it at 1.77 or 1.78 to 1 aspect ratio, which is basically 16 by 9 if you round it up to whole numbers. But the red footage here is 4096 by 2160. Let's divide that, and look what we get. This is a bit wider aspect ratio. Instead of 1.78 to 1, this is 1.89 to 1. This is kind of a cinema aspect ratio. And this is what the cinematographer was going for. Ultimately, it was a 1.89, and they knew they were shooting 1920 by 1080, and they used guides on the camera to make sure that they were shooting the right aspect ratio with the 1920 by 1080 format. So we've got two different aspect ratios there. And let's grab this one and drag it into a timeline here. And we basically have, look at this, we have one audio channel, but it is a stereo. It's got a left and right. It's got a stereo channel audio file that was just an in-camera audio on this clip here. So when we encode proxy footage, we want to use a preset for this one that's going to be a video plus one audio track with a stereo audio track. And when we do a preset for the red footage here, let me grab that and drag it in, we're going to do a preset that just has video and no audio. Now what I'm going to do is get a red file that's a slightly different file to show a slightly different issue here. I'm going to go under my media browser, find a red file here. Now this one, they weren't really recording audio on the camera, but they had the audio function turned on, so it actually record audio channels with the footage that they were shooting. Even, like I said, even though they didn't have a microphone going into the camera, it has audio channels added. So you got to be aware of this when you're doing your proxy workflow here. You got to be very conscious of this when you're setting things up. I'm going to import that clip. And look at this here. This one has a video strip with an audio waveform there. So this one has audio that belongs to it. This one here is properly set up for cinema here. They turn the audio file off, which saves a little bit of hard drive space, and also which makes the files a little bit smaller because it doesn't have an audio track, and actually makes it a little bit easier to have a workflow. I'm going to grab this file here. We're going to drag it down to a timeline here. Just drop it over that one. And look at this. Look at the nature of this. Of course, there's no audio waveform because it didn't have a mic plugged in the camera, but it recorded audio channels attached to the video. And notice the way the nature of the red was set up here. It has channel 1 and channel 2. They're not necessarily left channel, right channel, like up here. These are two separate audio mono channels here. So you have one mono channel and two mono channels. So you have to be very aware of that when you're setting up presets for encoding. So let's say we're going to be using these three types of footage in our project here. So we've got 1920 by 1080, and let's look at this, and let's look at the aspect ratio on this one. This is 4800 by 2700. And 4800 divided by 2700 is 1.77. So this shares the same aspect ratio as our 1920 by 1080 footage. This is basically a 16 by 9 or 1.78 to 1 aspect ratio, even though it's now near 5K footage. So those are the two most important things that you want to know of. So right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do basically three setups. One of my proxy presets is going to be a 16 by 9 stereo channel preset. And then the other one is going to be a 16 by 9 two mono channel setup. And then my third one is just going to be a 1.89 to 1 aspect ratio with no audio on it. So there I've got three different presets for this project I'm going to be working on. So I'd say the most important thing you can do when you are setting up to do proxy workflow inside of Premiere is know your aspect ratios and know the nature of your audio channels that you're dealing with here. And it actually shows it in the information here. If I select this video here, there's you'll have to do the math to figure out your aspect ratio. But here we've got one stereo channel. Here we've got two mono channels. Here we've got zero audio. So the first step here to creating proxy files is I'm going to open Media Encoder. Premiere uses Media Encoder to do all of its proxy workflow to encode everything. So I'm going to open Media Encoder. And we're going to use Media Encoder to generate some proxy ingest settings. If you're on a Mac, I'd probably recommend using some of their ProRes settings. The ProRes settings are really, really nice for doing proxy workflow. You just have to make sure, once again, whether you use ProRes or H.264, you just have to make sure that they will match those audio file presets. And one that actually works pretty well on the PC is a QuickTime Video that's called the Cineform codec. And that's actually, it supports a bunch of resolutions. It supports also different audio channels. And it's also a very nice optimized codec that works really well on both a PC and a Mac. So under my preset browser here, I'm going to go down, I'm going to add some presets. I'm going to click on this little plus button. I'm going to create three different, first of all, you have to create an encoding preset, and then you're going to generate an ingest preset based on the encoding preset. It's kind of a weird step you have to take, but it's still one you have to take within this workflow. First step is to create all your encoding presets, which I'm going to do now. I'll create the first one for my 1920 by 1080 video with a stereo file. So under this here, I'm going to go under Format. I'm going to tell it to do QuickTime Video. And under preset here, actually I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to go under my video tab and set this up custom. I'm going to pull this down and say we're going to use the GoPro Cineform codec here, which is a nice optimized codec. The quality 4 is really good, where you're going to get a good looking quality here. I'm going to uncheck my chain here so I can set my own custom, format here. And for the first one was a 1.78 to 1 aspect ratio. So 1280 by 720, if you do the math on that, is a 16 by 9 or 1.78 to 1 aspect ratio. I'm going to choose my frame rate to match. I'm working with 23.976 on everything here. The field order won't matter. I'm going to tell it to do square pixels here. Square pixels is standard for everything these days. So unless you're working with older footage, right here we've got YUV 10-bit, which is kind of a nice lower quality that's going to look good, but it's going to have very small file size. Now the next thing I need to set up is my audio. I'm going to go into my audio. I'm going to look at my sample rate. That's fine. Bit sample is okay. Audio has no issues playing back channels of audio quickly. But this is what I need to look at right here. I've got one stream of audio, and it's a stereo audio channel. And that works for what I'm doing right there. My first audio file was actually a single stereo, and I'm going to rename this here. I'm going to go under my preset. I'm going to rename this I'm going to call it Proxy 1.78 for my aspect ratio and stereo. So now I know exactly what this preset is. And I'm going to hit OK, and it generates that preset right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and create my other two here. Create an encoding preset. Same thing, QuickTime, video, GoPro. So now since I'm on the 16:9, I'm going to set this up for my red. I'm going to set this up for my red footage. That was the 16:9 footage. It was almost 5K footage, but it was 16:9 or 1.78 to 1. Since it's already there, I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to leave everything else the same there. But I'm going to go into the audio. The audio was the different thing here. That red file that was 16:9 had 2 mono files. So I'm going to change this one here, my audio, to mono. So there's 1 mono channel, but I need an additional channel here. So I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to hit plus, and it's going to add another mono. So now I've got 2 channels that are both mono. That should match my red footage right there. So I go up to my preset name, and I'm going to name this Proxy 1.78. That's my aspect ratio, and 2 mono channels to match that red footage that I brought in. So I'm going to hit OK and generate 1 more for my other red footage without any sound. So I've got the same settings here. So I've got the same settings based off the last preset that I did. But now I've got, let's go into video and change my video. So I need to find an aspect ratio that's going to be 1.89 to 1. So my footage here, my aspect ratio that's the 1.89 to 1 is 4096 by 2160. So let's get the calculator. And I want it close to 720 footage, so I'm going to actually have to divide this probably by 4 to get it down small enough. I could do 2K footage approximately. That might be a little bit large for my computer, so I'm just going to take it. I'm going to go 4096 divided by 4 and take it down to 1024. 1024 is the resolution going from left to right there. And my vertical resolution is 2160 divided by 4 as well, takes it down to 540. My final proxy resolution is going to be 1024 divided by 540, and that equals a 1.89 to 1 aspect ratio. So that's the resolution I'm going to use. It's a little bit smaller than 720. It's going to still look decent on my machine. I'm going to divide it by 4 because if I divide it by 3, if I divide it by 2, first of all, it's going to be 2K footage and it's going to be kind of large. If I divide it by 3, it won't divide into whole numbers. So I'm just going down to 4. So I'm going to go 1024 by 540. And that might be too low resolution for some people, but it's going to work fine just for my edit here. So there's my video preset, and up here all I have to do, since it doesn't have audio, I'm just going to simply uncheck audio. And now it's just going to be recording, now it's just going to be doing a proxy workflow for just video since my other red footage did not have audio. And under my new preset, I'm going to call this Proxy 1.89 no audio, and hit OK, and my preset is set. So now I've got those 3 channels set there. Now I'm going to create an ingest file here. I'm going to go under create ingest preset. And down here, I'm going to have checkmark transcode files to destination. I'm going to choose that later, so I'm just going to kind of ignore that. But right now, what I'm going to do is go down, pull down Format. I'm going to choose QuickTime. And what that will do when I bring up QuickTime is will bring up all of my QuickTime presets here. So under Format here, I've got transcode files to destination instead of transfer. We're not transferring, we are transcoding. And I'm going to choose QuickTime. And now I can create a proxy out of this. Now I can create an ingest preset out of Proxy 2-channel mono. 2-channel mono. And I'm going to go under preset name. And I'm going to call this kind of the same name, but I'm going to call it ingest. So I know that this is an actual ingest preset I'm going to bring into Premiere. This will all start to make sense soon here. There's my ingest preset, and I'm going to do that for the other 2 as well. Create an ingest preset, pull this down, go under QuickTime 1.78 stereo, and do my last setting, no audio. And that is how you get these ingest settings created, and these are almost ready to go for Premiere now. Now the last step I have to take is to get these out of Media Encoder into a file where I'm going to put them in my project folder as files that you're going to import as ingest presets. I'm going to right click and say export presets, and under the folder here where I'm working, I'm going to right click and put a new folder, and I'm going to make a proxy folder. That's where all my media is going to be contained, and I'm also going to put my my ingest settings in there as well. I'm going to double click, save that under there, and do the same to both these ones as well. Export presets, put it in the same folder location, export presets, and do all 3. Okay, now we are done in Media Encoder for the time being. I'm going to close Media Encoder. I'm going to go inside Premiere. I'm going to clear out all my media here, and we're going to go under File, Project Settings, and we're ready to start ingesting. I'm going to go Ingest Settings. Under Ingest Settings, I'm going to check mark Ingest, tell it to create proxies. And this you have to be very careful with as well. I'm going to do it one at a time. I'm going to add an ingest setting to each type of media, and I've got 3 types of media, remember, that I'm using here. So under Create Proxies here, I'm going to add an ingest preset. I'm going to find that file here. Let's import our red footage that was 2 mono channels first of all to start with. I'm going to check that, and under Proxy Destination, I'm going to choose a location. I'm going to tell it to save it under my proxy folder here. I'm going to just save all my media under my proxy folder here. And I hit OK. And now I'm going to import, with those settings set, I'm going to import my red footage that directly relate to that exact preset that I've created. I'm going to go into my media browser, find that footage that I'm importing right here, and I'm just going to import, let's just import a few clips so this will go quickly here. Okay, I've got those 3 clips. I'm going to right click and import. It's imported into my project area here. Media Encoder opens up this window here and automatically starts encoding footage to generate proxy footage. While that's going, I'm going to go back to Premiere and let's import all of our other type of media here. I'm going to go up to my ingest settings. You got to be careful and make sure that you switch your ingest settings for each type of clip. If you're using one type of video footage throughout the whole thing, that's going to work the best. But if you're using mixed media like I'm doing, you've got to be very conscious of this. I'm going to pull this down and let's say, and here I'm going to add an ingest preset. I'm going to grab our stereo next, which was my Sony media, and hit OK. I'm going to go to my media browser and go to my Sony footage and import that. And once again, I'm going to import just a couple clips just to make this go by quickly. Let's grab this one, that one, good enough. Right click, import, and it imported in here. Now it's going to use the new preset setting that I generated there. Go to Media Encoder and notice it's added that media there, and it's got those specific custom settings that I generated, specific file type. And now let's import our last one. So I'm going to have to go to File, Project Settings, Ingest Settings, and add our last preset. Add Ingest setting, choose the one with no audio, hit OK, and now my whole project is set up for that no audio. So any footage that I import is going to do no audio. So once again, you got to be careful that I'm just importing the footage with no audio. And be very familiar with your footage. I'm going to go to my media browser, onto my red footage. Once again, choose just a couple files here. Choose my red footage, and I'm just going to, instead of importing it all, I'm just going to choose a few files here. Right click, import. Those 3 files are added with no audio. Go to Media Encoder, and those 3 files have been added with the presets that I've chosen. So each one of these has its own preset. This Sony media has its own preset, and then this red footage here at the bottom has its own preset since each file type is a little bit different one from another. So I've customized my proxy footage for these 3 different types of file types. I'm going to let that load, and then we'll come back and take a look. Okay, all the encoding is now finished. I'm going to close Media Encoder and go back to Premiere. Now the footage that's in Premiere here is going to have proxy footage now associated with the high quality footage. And how we're going to be able to tell that is, first of all, I'm going to go to the metadata section right here. I'm going to right click on this metadata and say Metadata Display. The metadata display will pop up, and under this Premiere Pro project metadata here, if you arrow down toward the very bottom here or scroll down, there's a check mark here you can add for a proxy. If I check mark that and hit OK, it'll add proxy to this metadata bar up here. Right now I can't see it because I put it on the very, very end, so I can just scroll over, and there it is right there. I can grab this proxy. I'm going to drag it over here to the left, all the way over to the left, and put it right there next to the media. And right here it says that proxy footage is attached. It says that proxy footage is attached to all the media files that I have here. Now let's start editing. Let's say, well, first of all, what aspect ratio do I want to edit in? Let's say we're going to convert everything to 1.89 to 1. We're going to have it a little bit wider, even though this is 16 by 9 or 1.78 to 1 footage, and this is as well. We're going to make it the 16 by 9 footage, which is this footage right down here. So I'm going to create a timeline based off of this footage here. I'm going to grab the clip, drag it, and drop it onto my new timeline here. And now my timeline is set up as 4096 by 2160. And 4096 divided by 2160 is 1.89 to 1. So this is kind of a cinematic aspect ratio we're dealing with here. And any footage that I drag in here is going to conform to that footage there. I'm going to say keep the existing settings when I drop the Sony footage in, and it scales it up to fit this at 1.89 to 1 footage as best it can, but it has these pillar boxes on the side instead of the letterbox. But let's do a couple quick edits with my footage here. I'm going to find a clip here, just move into it a little ways, do an in point, out point, period to drop it into my timeline. Grab another clip here, in point, out point, period to drop it into my timeline. And notice it has that one single channel that's a stereo channel, and some of my other red footage here. I know this footage doesn't really match, but it's not for the same project, but I'm going to do an in point, out point, drop it into my timeline. And I've got my 2 mono channels there. So I have all this footage in my timeline here, and And if I try to play through this footage here, it's going to start getting laggy and slow. Already that's just getting super laggy because it's accessing, right now it is accessing the high quality footage. So we want to change this to Proxy. I'm going to move up to my program monitor here, and I'm going to look at my button editor. My button editor here does not have the Proxy Switch. I'm going to go to this little plus switch right there, this little button editor, and here is the Proxy Switch, the toggle proxies icon right here. I'm going to grab that and drag it down into my program window, drop it, hit OK. And now, whenever I hit this, it'll automatically go to the proxy footage. Now I can press play, and notice it is playing back at full speed here and doing just fine. If I move to the next clip, it plays back just fine. Move to the next clip, plays back just fine. So right now this is accessing, when this is blue, this is accessing the proxy footage. I'm going to hit this again, and that's really all there is to it. Okay, and one other recommendation I'm going to make is sometimes you're not going to be able to tell if you're going between your proxies or not here. When you're hitting, that is your proxy there, that is not, and it kind of looks exactly the same, which is the point. But if you want to be able to really tell that you're on your proxies, I'm going to give this recommendation here. I'm going to go under my presets here. I'm going to right click on one of my presets and just set one of these here. I'm going to go to Preset Settings, and under these tabs here, I'm going to go to Effects. I'm going to scroll down, and we're going to add a Timecode Overlay. I'm going to put this at the bottom right just so it's kind of out of the way, and you can change the size here and the opacity of it and everything. I'm just going to leave all these default, and we're going to use the timecode source from the actual media file there, so it will generate the timecode based off of the clip. I'm going to hit OK, and that has been added to that preset right there. I'm going to create an ingest setting. I'm going to get rid of the old ingest setting here. We're going to delete that, and I'm going to make a new setting for the timecode window right here. I'm going to hit create new preset, or create new ingest preset. I'm going to choose my preset under my QuickTime here, and I'm going to use that 2 mono. This now has that timecode window added. I'm going to name this same name as I had before for the previous ingest setting. Hit OK. Right click on this and export my preset. I'm going to replace my old presets here, my 2 mono right here. Save it, replace it, yes. And now we're going to go back to Premiere, and I'm going to ingest some more footage here based on the 2 mono channels, the red footage with the 2 mono channels. So now that I'm going to import that new media here, I'm going to go to File, go to my project, Settings, and go to Ingest Settings, and I'm going to set this for the new preset here. I'm going to grab my 2 mono channels that exists already. Do you want to overwrite it? Yes, I'm going to overwrite it because it's the new one. Hit OK, and let's import 2 new files here. I'll grab this shot and right click and import. So we've added those 2 new files. This is going to open up Media Encoder, add those 2 files to encode to proxy files. And actually, you can see down here as it's encoding, you can see it is adding a timecode window to the proxy footage. So we're going to let this finish encoding, then we'll come back and see how this kind of helps with the proxy workflow. Okay, now that that is finished encoding, I'm going to close Media Encoder, and we've got these 2 new files I've imported here. I'm going to do a couple quick edits with that. In-point, out-point, drop it in. In-point, out-point, drag that in, and we've got our 2 files in there. Now watch what happens when I put the mouse over here. Right now it's not on proxy, so notice it has no watermark or timecode down here. As soon as I click proxy, it's now accessing. I know it is because I burned this window in here as part of the media coding and process. Now I know when I'm working with the proxies for sure. It brings up that timecode window as I play, plays through the footage just fine, I go to the next clip, and it has that timecode window burned in there. And now we know we're accessing the proxies. So if I click that again, timecode disappears, and now it's on the full quality footage. So that's a quick rundown on the proxy workflow in Premiere. One other thing to be careful of as well is if you're merging files, if you're creating new files in here by merging video and audio files, make sure that you go to your ingest settings under your project settings and turn that off. Because if you don't turn that off and you sync an audio file with a video file and drop it into the timeline, merge it as a new file, it will start encoding that new file as proxy file when it doesn't need to do it. It's a little redundant. So I would just make sure that when you're done importing footage, uncheck that, because you want to be careful when you're importing other footage that you don't need it to encode to proxy. Then you just don't want it to encode everything to proxy if you don't need that. So anyway, that is the workflow on Proxy in Premiere. If you have any questions, please post them, and thanks for watching.